Welcome in to episode 37 of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Happy to be back live high atop a beautiful city of Houston, Texas. The college football playoff is now 19 days away. Thank you to everyone tuning in live. I am live right now with a frequent guest of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports here on the 37th episode in a packed show once again, as there are rumors abound. We've got a schedule to get to. We've got college basketball to talk about. We've got transfer portal stuff. I mean, we could go all day. But Emmy Nixon, how are you tonight?
I'm good, man. There's you hit me up and you're like, yo, there's news to cover. There's news around, and I was like, say less. Let's do this thing. Um, the this part of the year, the last couple of years, really, for December in terms of college football, it's been all about the transfer portal and recruiting, and it's always about recruiting, but this transfer portal and how it has changed the sport. The chaos that has ensued. It's for the better, depending on how you look at it. For me, at least, it's for the better. Like this is, we're gonna get into it, but man, it's been so good.
Yeah, and just to remind everyone, as I mentioned various times over the course of last night's episode, where to just give a quick recap Cliff Notes version of it, um, I talked about a couple recruiting rumors as we approach what is early signing day for the 2024 class a week from today. A week from today, Wednesday. So December 20th, next Wednesday, is early signing day where most of the 2024 commits in the 2024 recruiting class for this high school cycle will sign their national letters of intent. Some will wait until the second signing day, which occurs the first week of February, right before the Super Bowl. Some will wait and weigh their decisions more, but most of the guys in the Texas class expect to sign next Wednesday. So next week, as I mentioned on last night's episode, it'll be a heavy recruiting week. I'm going to do a signing day special next Wednesday where I break down the entire class. And so that could be a little bit longer of an episode. Maybe I can figure out a guest or two for that episode as well. And then we'll obviously have an episode related to the college football playoff soon. That'll be a fun episode. I just have to figure out and coordinate that with Emmy. But last night we talked about Kobe Black and the speculation around his recruitment. He committed to Texas earlier this afternoon in what is a huge get for the Longhorns in their 2024 class. We'll talk more about that at the end if we have time. I talked about Xavier Filsaime, the five-star safety out of McKinney, Texas, who's right now committed to Florida. But the momentum suggests, with Steve Sarkisian and this coaching staff making an in-home visit here this week, and Xavier Filsaime, the borderline five-star safety from McKinney, taking an official visit to Texas this weekend, it suggests that momentum is building towards a flip situation there. So I talked about that. I got into transfer portal targets with particularly the receiver room. I broke down what Texas is going to lose, how many scholarship receivers they'll have going into the spring, why they need to get 2, possibly even 3 receivers in the portal, a couple new targets I talked about, and I also talked about Trey Moore in last night's episode, the UTSA Edge. So if you want to catch any of that content, go back and watch last night's episode. I also started my college basketball tiers list, but barely got really anywhere into that besides talking a little bit about Purdue and Arizona. So hope you guys enjoy tonight's episode. I'm happy to have Emmy on because we have to react to an SEC schedule. But first, right after the Kobe Black commitment, news came down that Maalik Murphy plans to enter the transfer portal. Now, when I initially saw this news, I thought, okay, well, he's going to enter the transfer portal. but plans suggest that he's going to wait to enter the portal until after the season is over, after the national championship game, when the second portal window opens. Uh, but news came down shortly thereafter that he's actually entering the portal and he's not going to be with the team for the college football playoff. So I guess your reactions. What are your initial thoughts, your feelings about Maalik Murphy entering the transfer portal?
Well, for me, I don't have a ton of strong feelings for or against it. I think the writing has been on the wall here for a while in terms of this. I think um, it was kind of inevitable. I think, and to be honest, it's I think a testament to how committed he was. The fact that he did stay for this season, knowing that he would be the backup. But even so, I think um, the news that he isn't going to stay for the playoff that was surprising. But at the same time, the reasoning there it is sound. It makes sense. The quarterback market right now, it's fast and furious, and these top quarterback slots are closing up extremely quickly. So from Maalik Murphy's point of view, it was a no brainer. I think Texas fans knew that he would be in the portal, but I think what caught everyone off guard, of course, was the fact that he's not going to stick around for the playoff. But at the same time, it probably shouldn't have, because it just makes sense.
Yeah,
The
it's
other part of this is the Arch Manning angle of it. The fact that he is the true backup now, which is, you know, exciting and also a little bit sobering as well. Like, we're one play away from Arch Manning time. Like, was not mentally prepared for that.
yeah. So I have some thoughts on this. Number one, let me just read you the Pete Thamel tweets first. So today around 5:15 p.m., shortly after the Kobe Black announcement, source from Pete Thamel himself. Texas quarterback Maalik Murphy intends to enter the NCAA transfer portal. He's alerted the Texas coaching staff of his intentions. He then follows that up about 20 minutes later, saying that Maalik Murphy told ESPN he's not going to be with the Longhorns in the college football playoff. Uh, he would have preferred to stay through the season, meaning through the end of whatever result, whatever the immediate future holds for the Longhorns in the playoff. He would have preferred to stay through the season, but the timing did not allow it. Murphy told ESPN, "It's nothing against Texas at all. I'm doing this purely for me and my future. In my eyes, I'll always be a Longhorn and a part of this great team." So, first of all, I want to say I wish all the best in the world to Maalik Murphy. If Texas, they've already accomplished something great this year. They reached their first goal. They accomplished their first goal, their primary goal this year, which was win the Big 12 championship. They did that. They got to Arlington. They won the Big 12 championship. If Texas goes on, though, to accomplish greater things, if they climb the mountain to immortality and say win the national championship this year, which I think is very possible. The way that they played at the end of the season, if they play anything close to that, they could certainly accomplish that feat, and that'd be amazing. But Texas, and you can say this about a lot of different players, but Texas is certainly not where it is right now without the services of one Maalik Murphy. And he's, of course, going to get a ring if Texas goes on to do that. He was a big part of them winning the Big 12 championship, and I wish him all the success moving forward wherever he goes. I don't know. It's too early since he's not really even in the portal yet. I don't know when exactly he's going to enter the portal. I don't know what interest has gone on behind the scenes, but I assume that based on his talent, his size, his arm talent, uh, the way that he throws the football, what we've already seen from him in a couple games in his career, um, the NFL caliber body that he has and his arm talent alone, there will be lots of interest from a lot of these programs that are going to need quarterbacks moving into next year. Uh, I've heard the least of the speculation that I've heard is that Ohio State might have some interest. They may have had some backdoor conversations behind the scenes about that potentially being something that could develop here in the next couple of weeks. But regardless, whether he lands on his feet at another SEC school, he goes out west to play in what is, I guess, now mostly the Big Ten, or wherever he ends up, I wish Maalik Murphy all the best because this Texas team, they love that kid. Like he was one of those guys in the locker room that, and this has been reported industry wide, like he is beloved by the Texas roster. And I'm sure there are lots of mixed feelings for Texas with him entering the portal and not being there for the college football playoff. But I know he'll be rooting Texas on. He's one of those guys that I believe will always be tied to Sark and always be tied to Texas. And he's one of those guys, and you can't say this necessarily about everyone. As hard and diehard of a Texas fan that I am, everyone that leaves this program, like you don't always have that kind of connection to. But Maalik Murphy is a little different. Like everybody, Sark included, loves Maalik Murphy. And it's unfortunate that he has to transfer, but he has to look out for what's best for him and his future. You don't get to stay in college forever. And I think we saw some good things this year. There's lots he has to improve upon, but he's going to get an opportunity now to go and play college football somewhere else to hopefully raise his stock to where he can play in the NFL. And I'm rooting for him to accomplish such feat and much, much more beyond that. I think what he can accomplish if he reaches his ceiling could be something pretty special.
Definitely. Yeah, man. I'm right behind you on all of that. I mean, Maalik is, whether Texas wins a playoff game or not, he was a part of a historic season in terms of the first time Texas has reached a college football playoff game. In this whole college football playoff era, Texas had never gotten close. And the fact that we had multiple games where he had to step in and, keep this thing afloat in must-win scenarios, and he did that. He's always going to be beloved at Texas, like no matter what. So,
and to be clear, we can talk a little bit more about this, and we have to move on. But as a member of Texas's 2022 recruiting class, Murphy was ranked the number 12 overall quarterback and the number 15 prospect in the state of California overall. And California is another one of those hotbeds for high school football prospects in the On3 industry ranking. And he was a high 4-star, borderline-ish 5-star quarterback prospect. His talents were 5-star talents. The industry just did. There's only so many 5-star ratings that these services can give out. And there were quarterbacks ahead of him that warranted those ratings in their eyes more so than Maalik did. But Murphy will have 3 years to play if he so chooses to at his next destination because he played this year as a redshirt freshman. Because he redshirted last year with his injury, and he played this year as a true redshirt freshman. So next year he'll be going into his true sophomore season and as a player, and I wish him all the best. I think the Arch Manning angle of this is really, really interesting. He's now slotted in to be the backup. We are now one play away from him being in the game. We got to see a little bit of him at the end of the Tech game, but I don't think that tells us much. So we'll have to see. Hopefully, we don't have to see him in a playoff game, and that's not a shot at Arch at all. It's just having Quinn Ewers in there gives Texas the best chance for success, and that's the bottom line. But I think it's interesting now because I think this move, more so than anything, actually tells us more about the future of what Quinn Ewers. I think I'm not sure, and maybe he still does. I can't speak in definitive terms here, but I'm pretty sure if Maalik knew 100% that Quinn was going to the NFL, I'm not sure he makes this move right now. He might still transfer come spring ball or after spring ball. He might still make a move. But if he knew for sure that Quinn behind the scenes was going to go to the NFL no matter what, and there's still a chance that Quinn goes to the NFL. But if he knew like 100% Quinn's going to the NFL, I think he would have thought harder about potentially staying around for at least a little longer to compete with Arch Manning throughout spring ball because he knows I've already been ahead of Arch Manning on the depth chart. I know Arch Manning, and the plan for him seems to be that Texas wants to kind of play it as slow as they can with him to a certain extent while he develops his body. He just turned 18 not too long ago, learns the system, this intricate offensive sarc, and then adjusts to Texas while he gets some playing time in games. But maybe I can be the starter next year if Quinn leaves. I'm not sure he makes this decision as easily. Not that it was an easy decision in the first place if he knows that Quinn goes to the NFL. I still think there's a chance that Quinn goes to the NFL, but it's been reported for weeks upon weeks now that he's heavily leaning towards coming back next year. And so my point is, I think this move might tell you a little bit more about what the plans are for Quinn Ewers, although I'm not sure that Quinn will announce his actual intentions until after the playoff.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so we can talk more about the portal later on, but for now we got to move on. I think that was enough on Maalik. I mean, good luck to him. Wish him the best. Who knows? Maybe he'll even still be at the Sugar Bowl because Sark has made an exception to the rule this year, where even if you enter your name into the portal, you can stick around for the playoff, even if you're a non-participant in the game or whatever. So maybe he still is at the Sugar Bowl. Maybe he is at the national championship to root on this team. I wouldn't be surprised because he's such a team guy. But good luck to him. I'm really interested to see what interest he garners and where he ends up. And we'll certainly talk about it when he does make a decision. That'll be something to discuss for sure. But December 13th, 6 p.m. on ESPN, we had a 2-hour reveal show for the SEC, the 2024 full SEC schedule, with Texas and Oklahoma entering the conference. And so I'm going to see if I can make this work here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. And we can start with the Texas side of things. So hopefully you can see that well enough. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that.
All right. So for those of you watching at home, if you're listening on podcast, you can just listen. But if you're watching on YouTube or on our Twitter feed, the games in burnt orange are home games. The games in white are road games, are true road games. And then you have the bye weeks in black. So Texas in non-conference will start off hosting Colorado State. Then they'll have the big non-conference game at Michigan, which could be a rematch of a possible national championship. Who knows? Then they'll come home. They'll host Jeff Traylor in a really good UTSA program. They'll probably roll over UL Monroe. No offense to Louisiana Monroe, but Texas will beat them. And then they'll start their first slate of SEC games ever. Their inaugural slate of an SEC schedule as a program in the SEC. And here's how it will go. They'll host Mississippi State on September 28th to open their SEC slate at home in DKR. Then they'll get a bye week after that game. And one of the things that initially stands out to me for Texas, which I think is good, is they start out 4 of the first 5 games are at home in DKR, which I really like. They get the bye week after Mississippi State. Then, as always, around the second week of October, you have OU, and that's actually a neutral site game, as always, at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. Then after that, back-to-back weeks, you play Georgia at home, and that's really the biggest one that I think a lot of Longhorn fans will have their eyes drawn to initially. Then you go at Vanderbilt after playing Georgia and Oklahoma. Then you have another bye, and then to finish out in November, where you could potentially make or break your season when it comes to potentially making the 12-team playoff, Florida at home, at Arkansas, Kentucky at home, and then the big one at Texas A&M. Emmy, your initial reactions and takeaways when you look at Texas's first schedule in the SEC.
Well, I think, seeing the 8-game slate and seeing, the 2 bye weeks on the schedule, I didn't think it would look at as, strange as this. I'm still not quite used to the whole 2 bye weeks thing, but I think it's beneficial for sure. In terms of the actual schedule, I think the fact that it's 4 home games in the SEC and 3 road games, I think makes a difference for sure. I think in following seasons, when it's the other way around, you'll feel it. But for this season in particular, if you go undefeated at home, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 wins just off the bat. That's it's not like that in most years, I don't think.
Yeah, so my initial reactions. First of all, I think it's beneficial that in your first month, the first 5 games, you get 4 of those 5 games in DKR. And with the way that Chris Del Conte and the athletic department has really, really improved the game day experience and the overall hostility of the environment at DKR, as we've seen the past couple seasons, it's harder to win now at DKR. Like, it's a real SEC kind of environment.
Yeah.
And I think it's really beneficial that they will start their season 4 of the first 5 weeks at DKR. Now, I don't love the fact that they're probably going to play their most emotional game, as always, most physical, emotional game, arguably, against Oklahoma next year, and have to follow that up by coming home to play the monster that is the red and black in Georgia. With the Carson Beck coming back, the additions they're going to make in the portal. Don't love that. Oklahoma and Georgia back-to-back is brutality. There's just really no way around that. I think if Texas could win one of those games, that would be a success. Now, it's way too early to speak in those kind of terms. Probably shouldn't, because there's still so much to play out in the portal and in recruiting here in the next couple months before we can actually look ahead to next year officially. But that's brutal. I mean, Oklahoma, Georgia, the committee didn't really do Texas any favors there. I would have rather had the bye week to separate OU and Georgia, theoretically, if I were to be making my own Texas schedule, but that's just me. You should win at Vanderbilt. Then you get another bye week, and I do like, and this is my next reaction. I like generally where the 2 bye weeks are placed. I do like that. You get a bye week right before you go into the home stretch of November, where you have Florida at Arkansas, Kentucky, and A&M. 4 games that can potentially make or break your season in terms of making the 12-team college football playoff. And I do generally like where the first bye is slotted as well, although I might have moved it or adjusted it a week to account for the Oklahoma-Georgia thing that I mentioned earlier. But overall, I look at this schedule, and I think it's pretty – no easy – none of these 14 teams or 16 teams, whatever the SEC is now, have an easy schedule.
Yeah.
But compared to some of the other schedules I have seen tonight, and I haven't looked at all of them yet, Texas can manage this, I think. At Michigan won't be easy. That's going to be a rough one, potentially, going up there to Ann Arbor. But they could win that game. Who knows? They won it at Alabama, so I put nothing past this team, especially if they have Quinn Ewers back at the helm and an experience at the quarterback position. I think they could start realistically. They take care of business. They could start the season 4-1 and really give themselves some cushion going into that stretch with Oklahoma and Georgia. Because remember, with the 12-team playoff, you could potentially lose 2 games for sure and still make it in as an SEC school. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that if Texas goes 10-2 next year, they'll find a way in the 12-team playoff. You might be able to even lose 3 games as an SEC team and get the benefit of the doubt and still make the 12-team playoff. I'm not speaking in definitive terms, but that's still definitely a possibility. So it's not like you lose 2 games and you're out of this thing. So I think, and this will be kind of my final take on this for right now, because I still need to let this sink in a little more and think about it a little bit more. But Texas goes 4-1 in that first 5 games. They set themselves up really well for what remains of that schedule. I think if you go 4-1 and then you can say go 2-1 in those next 3, you now sit at, what is that, 6-2 through 8 weeks. I think there's a very good chance with Florida kind of being down, Arkansas certainly being down with KJ Jefferson leaving through the transfer portal. Kentucky will be a tough one, but at least you get that at home, and then at A&M, and we don't really know what to think of A&M right now. I think realistically, as of right now, and this could change, but as of right now, Texas could realistically win. Like, I think 9-3 could potentially be a realistic expectation for Texas' first year in the SEC, especially if they have Quinn Ewers back.
Yeah, I agree. I think having Quinn Ewers back is a big one. I think the experience factor of it plays a key role, and depending on the wide receiver situation, and then some of the dominoes that are yet to fall in terms of the transfer portal, I think 9 wins. That's not only the expectation, but it's also like, I think it's very realistic as well, because you've mentioned it. I mean, it's hard to win in DKR with how it is right now, and you're getting 8 road games. I'm not, and as long as you go out and you play a relatively close game with Georgia, I would consider that a positive, depending on where they're at next year. If they're at where I think they're going to be next year, then of course.
Yeah. So with all that being said, I think I've emptied out all my thoughts on Texas' side of things. Now I want to real quick look at Oklahoma's side of things for next year in the SEC. So let me stop sharing and let's look at Oklahoma's schedule really fast and react to that. And there's a bunch more regarding the SEC schedule that we'll get to in the future. But for tonight's show, I just wanted to talk about mainly Texas and Oklahoma. So let me know if you can see that.
I can see it decently well. Yeah.
Well, in case you can't, Oklahoma, in terms of what they're going to be looking at for next year, they open up with Temple in Norman. So they open up with 4 consecutive home games. So they open up with Temple at home, Houston at home, and Houston will have a new coach in Willie Fritz, who comes over from Tulane. They hope to get going in the right direction. Tulane, who's a good program, they get them at home. And then Tennessee will be their SEC opener. They'll get Tennessee at home. So their first 4 games, Temple, Houston, Tulane, and Tennessee. Their first true road game in the SEC will be at Auburn, at Jordan Hare, week 5, September 28th. Then they'll get their bye week before Red River. So both Texas and OU will have a bye week going into Red River. And then after Red River, they'll come home, just like Texas, to play South Carolina, who's kind of in a rebuilding, retooling phase right now, but we'll see what happens with them this offseason. Then they'll go on the road to play Ole Miss. That won't be easy in Oxford. Jackson Dart will be returning. I think Lane Kiffin's going to have a really good team next year. They might get the defensive lineman from A&M. Gosh, why am I blanking all of a sudden on his name? It'll come to me. But they're going to make some, I think, necessary additions in the portal that will make that team really, really good next year. That won't be an easy game. Maine at home in week 10 is kind of Oklahoma's version of Texas's Louisiana Monroe. Kind of get that cupcake sort of game that all SEC teams will get unless they move. If they ever move to a 9-game conference schedule here in the near future, that will be eliminated. But for right now, sticking to the 8-game schedule, you do get that one should-be layup. Then to finish the season, and this is what really stood out to me initially about Oklahoma's schedule, Missouri in Columbia. So you get Missouri, you have to go to Missouri, and given what Eli Drinkwitz is building at Missouri, that's not going to be easy. And they're going to have Brady Cook and Luther Burden returning next year, their leading receiver and their quarterback. And they've got a damn good recruiting class coming in. And Oklahoma has lost their quarterback. Now, they have a really talented freshman in Jackson Arnold, who's a 5-star, much like Arch Manning is, and he could be really good. But there's something to be said for experience, and Missouri, I think, is going to be a really good team moving forward. So that won't be easy. And then you get a bye, luckily. But to finish out your year, you host Alabama, who will have Jalen Milroe back and all their other talent. That's never easy. And then you have to go on the road to Death Valley late in November to play LSU. Those final 3 games could make or break Oklahoma's first year in the SEC. Missouri on the road, Alabama at home, and in Death Valley against LSU. Wow.
Oof. Yeah. That's a SEC schedule for you. Wow.
Absolutely. I actually think Oklahoma got relatively good break up until the final 5-ish games of their season. I think the first part of their season is pretty manageable. I think they'll probably beat given they take care of business in their non-conference. So they beat Maine, they beat Temple, they beat Houston, they beat Tulane. That's 4 wins right there. I think the Oklahoma-Texas game is always a coin flip. So let's take that out of the equation right now. But if we give them 4 wins in non-conference, I give them a win over South Carolina, given the uncertainty of what's going on with that program, given that game is in Norman. If we give them, say, one of the 2 road games against Missouri and LSU, I don't know that they win both those games, but let's say they win one of those 2 games. So that's up to 6. Let's say they lose to Alabama, but they beat Tennessee and Auburn. So now you're up to 8. So now you only got to win one of Texas and Alabama to get to 9. So I think they could end up in a similar spot as Texas going into year 1 in the SEC, where 9 wins could potentially be a expectation for them, certainly, even with a freshman quarterback. Because we've seen Oklahoma have success with freshman quarterbacks in the past. They have a knack for finding those guys. And I know they don't have Lincoln Riley anymore, but still pretty damn good at that. And I tend to give them, even though I despise Oklahoma, but I certainly respect their ability to be good offensively. They were really good offensively this year. Now I know they lose Jeff Lebby, their offensive coordinator, who becomes the head coach at Mississippi State. And Texas will face him in their first SEC game. But I mean, yeah, I think we'll just have to wait and see. Oklahoma did get Deion Burks, the talented, speedy receiver from Purdue, which we talked about last week on one of our episodes when we initially talked about the portal. He was one of the guys we mentioned as a Texas target, but I think Texas has other names higher on their list. And so he committed to Oklahoma, and he'll have a good opportunity to be a big part of that offense next year. I think he's an excellent add to that particular offense. He's a really good player. So we'll have to see what happens. Oklahoma is going to have to do some retooling along their offensive line. A couple of their offensive linemen have entered the portal, and you don't necessarily want to be retooling your offensive line going into the SEC, especially with an inexperienced quarterback. That's just a fact. The benefit that Texas gets as opposed to Oklahoma is that they're going to have 4 or 5 starters returning for sure on the offensive line. The only one that they'll be missing will be Christian Jones. And he's not going to be easy to replace, but they'll have Brandon Baker coming in this 2024 class, who's a 5-star guy from Modern Day High School out in California, who everyone expects to maybe even be the next Kelvin Banks. Certainly kind of feel better about Texas's situation along the offensive line and maybe even at the quarterback position if Quinn Ewers does announce his intention to return than I do Oklahoma. But I think Oklahoma, as opposed to what we would have said a year ago, given what they did this year, going 10-2 and beating Texas, has a really good opportunity to have a successful first year in the SEC. You just have to speak objectively, even if you hate them. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say on that. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I think seeing the actual schedules puts things in perspective a little bit, for sure. I think the need for the marquee non-conference game kind of goes out the window a little bit. Obviously, Texas has theirs with Michigan, but Oklahoma, I mean, you have potentially 4 or 5, top 25 ranked teams right off the jump.
Yeah. No, I mean, none of these schedules will be easy. There are, what is it? I think, how many teams? It's a 16-team conference now, once Texas and Oklahoma officially join come July 1st of 2024, when they'll officially be in the SEC. But there are other schedules that we'll have to look at here in the next month on our episodes of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports that we'll have to analyze. And once we get to know more about these rosters going into next year, this will certainly be a frequent topic of conversation. I wanted to react to mainly Texas and OU, though, as they are one of the reasons this was one of the most highly anticipated college football schedule reveals of all time, with the realignment going on, and with Texas and OU, two big brands and stalwarts in college football, moving into what is and has been the best conference for over a decade now. So
Yeah.
that's that. So let me stop sharing my screen.
I have a proposition for you.
Okay.
I'm not sure where you sit at in terms of like energy wise, but my proposition is we have like 10 or so minutes of just like open ended college basketball talk. What do you think?
What I might rather do is save college basketball
Okay.
for a better
Yeah.
time where we can get more into the weeds. So I
Yeah.
don't want to. I can go back and change description and title as I've done the past couple episodes later. What I think we'll do right now is talk some Kobe Black, this commitment that Texas got this afternoon, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the latest portal rumors just to finish out the show. Since we're already kind of on the Texas train here, talking about Maalik Murphy, quarterback situation, Texas SEC schedule, let's keep it Texas for this episode. And on our next dit hole, I want to have some college basketball conversations for sure. And then I'll have an opportunity to send you some of my notes, which I wanted to send you, and we can get more into the weeds. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds
Okay. So, and since this is back-to-back nights of Dit Hole, I wanted to follow up on the Kobe Black stuff because I addressed it last night, and now that he's committed, might as well address it again, right? So I gave you a little bit of background on our call earlier tonight when we were planning out our episodes for tonight. But for those of you who don't know, Kobe Black, he is. Let me get to his rankings real fast.
fifth ranked, I think. Wait, no.
No, he is. I'll get you the rankings here in just a minute. Here they are. Kobe Black, the 4 industry recruiting services. So 24/7, he's a high 4-star, the number 51 overall prospect nationally, and the number 11 overall prospect in the state of Texas. On 3, which is another service, he's actually a mid 4-star, number 97 overall nationally, number 21 in the state of Texas. And On 3, compared to these other services, for whatever reason, is a little lower on Kobe Black than the other ones. And it's not really sure why. It's kind of outrageous, in my opinion, when you watch his tape. ESPN, he's a high 4-star, number 20 overall prospect nationally, and the number 5 high school player in the state of Texas. And let's see, Rivals has him as a high 4-star, number 37 overall nationally, and number 8 overall in the state of Texas. So consensus is this kid is a borderline 5-star, high 4-star prospect. As I mentioned last night, stands about 6'2", 180, lengthy as a corner. And there's really not much about him when you put on the tape that really isn't simply just sensational. He's a sensational high school football player. I think he's the prototype, the perfect prototype for a modern day cornerback. And guys of his ilk historically, as a super blue chip guy in the state of Texas at his position, project really well into the NFL, being first and second round picks. And with his build, I think he's a guy that comes in right away and gets playing time. He'll be one of those guys that will get some playing time behind Malik Muhammad and Terrence Brooks right away. And he'll, I think, with his skill set, given that, here's an important note, he's played all different kinds of positions in high school. He's been at running back. If you put on his tape, you'll see him play running back. You'll see him play receiver. You'll see him play kick returner, punt returner. I mean, he's everywhere. He's just a really rock solid, really good football player, one of the best in the state of Texas. We'll get more into his skill set, particularly next week when we do our signing day breakdown, given that he signs in the early signing period. But I just wanted to follow it up a little bit. What are your thoughts on Texas getting a guy of this caliber? I know you don't know a whole lot about him, but I mean, I think adding him to what is already going to be a talented secondary going into next year, things could look really, really good for the secondary, given a potential move Texas might make in the portal here very soon with Derek Williams, with Malik Muhammad, with Terrence Brooks coming back, with Gavin Holmes coming back. There's just a lot of talent there.
I mean, practices next year are going to be a absolute battleground between this dude, Ryan Wingo, Tavion Sanders. I mean, first of all, I think, in terms of it being a team need, I think it's been addressed and some. I mean, we've looked at the numbers. I mean, the Texas this year is, I think, 96th in overall passing yards allowed in the country. Not good enough. And with those names you just mentioned, obviously, I mean, it was a point of emphasis coming into this recruiting cycle, and Sark and this staff has delivered and some once again. So I think this recruiting win is like just a cherry on top of everything. Really, I mean,
yeah, he is. Finish your point.
Go ahead.
No, finish what you're going to say. Do you have anything
I
else?
wasn't really going anywhere with that. Just go ahead.
Yeah, I think he projects as a high-level, multi-year starter. I think he's going to be a significant factor in this defensive backfield no later than like 2025. I think he's going to get some playing time next year, but as early as 2025, I think he's going to step in to be really, really solid as a starting quarterback because his length, his size, I think, and his skill set, I think will translate at the college level. And just to finish out this conversation, here's some math. Through the 2019 recruiting year, 13 of the 21 best defensive backs rated by Rivals.com, which is one of the recruiting services, 13 of the 21, so 62% of the best defensive backs rated by Rivals.com since 2002 went on to become NFL drafted players. So there's about given the ilk of Kobe Black, there's about a 62% chance, given the history, that he becomes an NFL player. And there is about there's a really good chance he's a first round day one NFL draft pick. Nearly 50% of those guys have gone on to be first round NFL draft picks. Like guys of his ilk generally most of the time hit at a very high rate. And that's, if you're Texas, that's the goal. Yeah. Get these talented players in, develop them, get him out in 3 years, put him in the NFL, because that's how you keep your program healthy. And Texas is doing an excellent job of that so far under Steve Sarkisian. So
Yeah.
lots more recruiting. I think what I'll need to do is I'm going to send you – I won't send you highlights of every guy in this recruiting class. That'd be way too much. But if I can get you on for that signing day special sometime next week, I want you to kind of see Colin Simmons. I want you to see Kobe Black. I want you to see Ryan Wingo. I want you to see Brandon Baker, the higher rated guys in this recruiting class. So you can come on and have a little bit better of an idea of these players that Texas is getting. So big commitment, big time commitment. I think he immediately is a top 4 or 5 player in this recruiting class. And I think there's a good chance that by the time these final rankings are revealed, he might earn that 5th star. There's a chance that he could still get and elevate himself to a 5-star. So, with all that being said, trying to figure out if there's anywhere else I want to go before we really put a bow tie on this episode of Dithole. One more thing. I talked about the receiver position last night in the portal. I broke that down. So if you want to go listen to that, please do. Greatly appreciate that. I talked about Trey Moore. And the intel on Trey Moore right now is I think he's scheduled to take an official visit here pretty soon. I think sometime in the next couple of days to Ohio State. But that is a heavy Ohio State-Texas battle for the talented edge player out of UTSA. 14.5 sacks, American Conference Defensive Player of the Year, over 20 sacks here in the past 2 years, going into his 3rd year of college football, highly coveted edge player in the portal. And I think if any program were to get a player like him, they'd be very, very happy. My sense is, through the reporting that I'm seeing, he's going to take that official visit to Ohio State, but Texas still is the heavy favorite to land a guy like Trey Moore here in the next week or so, is what I'm hearing. And they'll add him, if they get him, to a already very talented edge room and deep edge room. We could have Ethan Burke in his 2nd full year of starting with Colin Simmons, Trey Moore. Colton Vasek is a borderline 5-star guy that they got in that 2023 recruiting class who redshirted this year and didn't play at all. Barron Sorrell could even potentially come back, as he didn't have the kind of season that he thought he would, that maybe would propel him to the NFL after this year. So Texas they'll be really deep regardless at the edge position, but if they get Trey Moore, it'll all of a sudden go from 2 years ago being a pretty barren room on this roster to maybe being one of the more talented rooms from a position standpoint on this roster going into next season in the SEC. Your thoughts on that, if any?
Yeah, I mean, the recruiting has been. I mean, it's. I'm starting to get into it more. I still really don't know much about what really goes into it, but man, I mean, the success on that side of things has been astounding when it comes to Texas.
I think once you get a better feel for it, about what actually goes into recruiting, you'll develop a greater appreciation for all the work that goes into putting this together, and you'll kind of start to get a feel for most of these players that are coming to Texas as you get more plugged into Texas football program and are on Dithole more often. The last note before we get out of here for the night, on this 37th edition of Dithole. And if you have any questions or comments for our viewers that are viewing live right now, please leave them in the chat, and we'll get to them, I promise. If you do so, leave a question or a comment before we get out of here. But I want to give an update on a guy that we talked about last week from the safety standpoint. So they get Kobe Black. They're still looking for another body, maybe even two more bodies at safety. Talked about Xavier Filsaime at the beginning of this episode, the borderline 5-star safety who's committed to Florida right now, but is expected to flip to Texas here in the next week before signing day. Texas is probably looking for another more experienced body in that safety room, given that Jaron Thompson is graduating after this year. Jalen Catalon already entered the portal, as we talked about last week. Keaton Crawford, I think is coming back, but I'm not entirely sure of that. But Andrew Makuba, the 3-year starter out of Clemson, who we talked about last week, no need to rehash who he is as a player as of right now. The worry with him was that from an academic standpoint, as already going into his senior year, having so many college credits with only 1 year left of college, with some of these schools, it's harder to figure out transferring credits and how many credits this university is actually going to take from this school, that sort of thing. But sources are hearing that any transcript and or hours issues from a credit standpoint have been worked through and are no longer a hurdle that Texas has to get through, nor does Andrew Makuba. And multiple people have reported or told this particular source in the last 24 hours that they believe Andrew Makuba will end up a Longhorn as soon as Saturday or Sunday. The speculation right now, and it hasn't been 100% confirmed yet, Andrew Makuba was actually scheduled to take an official visit to Oregon this weekend. Earlier tonight, he canceled that visit and is now expected to be in Austin this weekend. And so my speculation with all of this coming together here in the last 24 hours is that he'll take that visit, and if he likes what he sees, he'll commit to the Longhorns by the end of this weekend. Your reaction to that, if any?
I mean, that's huge. I mean, again, don't know much about the guy, but I mean, 5-star, highly recruited. I mean, impact player, 3 years running at Clemson. I mean, you need those types of guys in your program. So
he'd add some much needed experience at the safety position. I'm hearing good things on Makuba. I'm hearing really promising things on Trey Moore, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago. From a receiver standpoint, it's still a little bit more up in the air. But what I do know is that Texas would like to get at least 2 bodies in the portal, maybe even 3. And there's one name in particular in Matthew Golden. Get that name in your head. Receiver out of Houston who entered his name into the portal yesterday. And one of the reasons, I talked about this on last night's show, that game against Houston, Texas Houston earlier this year was so close was because of the talents of Matthew Golden. There was a reason Texas was struggling to cover in that game. There were a lot of reasons, actually, but one of the reasons is because of Matthew Golden. He is really excellent as a wide receiver. I heard he's the highest of priority on their list when it comes to the portal right now. He fits this system. Speed is what they're looking for. And he's excellent. He scored 2 touchdowns and had over 100 yards in the game against Texas this year. And I think he fits exactly what Texas is looking for, as he could also replace a lot of the production on special teams that Texas will likely now need to replace, given that Xavier Worthy is going to go to the NFL.
has there been any word on the kid from South Carolina or Purdue yet?
So the Purdue guy, as I mentioned, committed to Oklahoma.
Okay.
Um,
Ew.
Texas, I think Texas had an interest in him, but he wasn't he wasn't like a huge priority
Yeah.
from a Texas standpoint, and Oklahoma made him a priority, and so kind of makes sense from that standpoint. As far as the South Carolina kid goes, I think it's a Texas Ole Miss battle.
Okay.
I think he's really attracted to potentially going to play for Lane Kiffin in the SEC with Jackson Dart coming back. Even though there's speculation that Quinn is going to come back, it's not 100% certain yet. They know that Jackson Dart's coming back next year. So I think it'll come down to Texas and Ole Miss. He's going to take an official visit to Ole Miss. Right now, I'd probably lean Ole Miss. But what I will say about that is I think Texas knows behind the scenes, they know something we don't. There are going to be more guys entering the portal, and they probably have their eye on one like they did last year and say like an A.D. Mitchell that they might want more than Juice Wells, who might fit better than Juice Wells. And keep in mind, Juice Wells is an excellent player, and I'd love to have him at Texas. But he's coming off pretty serious injury. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, that's true.
Given what Texas has gone through with the whole Isaiah Nair situation, that really didn't work out because of one of the injuries he had. Texas is probably a little bit more skeptical of these sorts of things as of right now. So I'd love to have Juice Wells. He's a different style of receiver than the Purdue guy at Oklahoma, or even say a Matthew Golden, who Texas I expect to get here pretty soon. But I think if I had to choose right now, based on what I'm hearing, that's probably an Ole Miss. Probably ends up at Ole Miss if I had to guess. Okay.
Gotcha.
But there will be other receivers that will enter the portal, and Texas will. There's one thing I'm not worried about with Steve Sarkisian. It's the ability to get wide receiver talent.
Yeah.
And remember, they have Jonte Cook. They have DeAndre Moore. They have Ryan Wingo coming in. So it's not like they're barren for talent. They just need experience. So as I laid out on last night's episode. So that's our portal segment for tonight. We address Maalik Murphy. We address Oklahoma and Texas as far as the SEC schedule is concerned. We address some recruiting with Kobe Black's commitment. We address portal rumors. We got to a lot in just an hour. So I feel really good about this. Make sure you go view last night's episode. There's some really good information in there. Greatly appreciate that. Leave a like and subscribe on our channel. Keep tuning in to Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. I think we got a fantastic thing going here. And as we slowly get closer to the college football playoff, as we now are in the middle of college football's war zone with the transfer portal running crazy and signing day coming up here next week for recruiting, it's just a wild time. So keep an eye out for more Dit Hole episodes as soon as this weekend. And we'll see you next time. Hook 'em horns, y'all. Kobe Black is a Longhorn, and everything is good. And let's hope Texas can get that win tomorrow. Texas against Wisconsin tomorrow in the Final Four of women's volleyball on ESPN. Texas looking and is now 2 wins away from repeating as national champions. So hook 'em horns. See ya.
Hook 'em.
Peace.
Yeah. Peace out.